Tucker Carlson interviews a nun, Mother Agapia from upstate New York, who has spent some years in Israel. And we're going to take a look at some of the statements that are made. Before we jump into the statements and start to sort of pick this apart, just general thoughts. Calev and Simone, what are your thoughts on this interview? Is this interview good or bad, in your opinion, for Israel? What are your thoughts about that?
It's hard to say. Obviously, Tucker Carlson is on the warpath. He wants to destroy the relationship between Israel and the United States and between Christians and the Jewish people. But I think he's maybe overplayed his hand in this case. I'm not exactly sure, but it was so ridiculous. I mean, putting somebody on air that basically says, Hamas isn't a terrorist organization. I know we're going to go into the specific things she said, but they're not the problem. They're just people trying to set people free, and downplaying this militant jihadist radical Islamic organization that's just as bad for Palestinians as it is for Israelis, trying to somehow, sugarcoat Hamas, I think has crossed the line. And anybody with half a brain can look at this and understand that, there's I would say, just an insidious agenda behind this. And so I'm not sure that it did major damage to Israel, but I think it's very important to address the points that they brought up, just to kind of clean the airwaves, so to speak.
Simone, good or bad for Israel?
Good.
Yeah.
It was so ridiculous. It's just, doesn't it kind of make his narrative and his side look like a bunch of idiots?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that this was a very good interview for Israel, and I tell you why. The level of absolute absurdity. When I first saw this, the image come across my feeds in social and on YouTube and whatever, at first I thought this was satire. Just the sheer imagery of this looked like a skit. And then you basically would have to literally know nothing about Israel. You would have to have never visited Israel. You would have to know absolutely nothing about geopolitics in the Middle East to believe a single word that she says in this interview.
That's right.
And I think this is very good for Israel because it so undermines Tucker Carlson's platform and what he's trying to achieve, which, Calev, as you stated, is inarguably to destroy the friendship and relationship between the United States and Israel. And specifically, he's trying to persuade and sway public opinion. Politicians that are pro-Israel are not going to be influenced by this whatsoever because they know the realities, they know the truth, which we're going to get into some of that. But he is trying to sway public opinion, and there is no question. Tucker is definitely involved in psyops and disinformation, misinformation. This is, in my opinion, of all the ridiculous interviews he's conducted recently, this one is over the top. So here we go. Let's kick it off.
Yeah, he talks about Israel not being able to exist without the United States quite often. And quite frankly, it's just not true. They absolutely can.
Let's look at that.
But the United States is a majority Christian country that pays for a huge percentage of the Israeli economy, both through trade and direct grants and military assistance and all the rest. Israel couldn't exist without the United States. And it has the support of so many Christians in the.
So this is just one little snippet of many where Tucker talks about how much money the United States gives Israel. And also, and this nun also is saying, they're building their beautiful gardens and swimming pools and the settlements on American tax dollars. And it's a theme that you'll notice for those of you that do take the 90 minutes. And I apologize in advance if you do that, because you'll probably want to, poke your eyes out with toothpicks and smash your TV. But, you'll hear this reoccurring theme, and just bear in mind, there's a point to this, right? Tucker's trying to get something across to you. He's trying to relay something to you, which is that everything that happens in Israel is as a result of American tax dollars, and that without America, the patron, I think Americans should really know about this. It's their tax dollars that are going to fund all of these different things. You're going to hear that type of language over and over and over again throughout this interview.
I asked ChatGPT to do the math on that, actually. And in America, somebody who pays their taxes, 0.06% of their federal taxes is allocated towards Israel. 0.06%.
0.06%. But also what he said was that America contributes a huge portion of the Israeli economy. But let's say the Israeli economy is, $500 billion a year, and America is giving $3 billion a year to Israel. That's like, 0.5% of the Israeli economy. The Israeli economy does not depend on the, security aid or guarantees coming in from the United States. It's just absolutely false.
Right.
Simone, you have a stat on that. Well, what's the percentage of the GDP?
It's less than 1%.
Right.
So the United States currently gives $3.8 billion a year. That is under 1% of Israel's GDP. So,
and we know that also is in what's called military grants, loans, however you want to call it.
Most of it's paid out in the United States. Exactly.
Right.
We say that often on these, but it's really important because they're spreading their misinformation and they're making these statements so often. So, hey, that money that goes to Israel in foreign aid is almost, it's definitely predominantly and almost exclusively in these military loans that require the state of Israel to purchase arms, services, and equipment from companies in the private sector in the United States, which leads to bolstering the U.S. economy and providing jobs for Americans. So before you start to rally, let's cut off all the aid to Israel, just note that, thousands and thousands of people here in the United States will lose their jobs if that were ever to happen.
Right. I asked ChatGPT to do a little research. ChatGPT.
It's a new AI platform.
I asked ChatGPT to go into detail about that, and they said without U.S. aid, Israel would still have a very strong military because they have powerful domestic arms industry already in Israel. They have, again, like you said, over $500+ billion GDP to fund their own defense. Like, they would be fine.
Yeah, and there's no question. Okay, but let's balance this all out with, hey, like, there is a great relationship between the United States and Israel that Tucker is trying to destroy and ruin, and there's been much collaboration in terms of trade and commerce. Of course, I wouldn't say that we're dependent on the United States, but we certainly work very much alongside with the United States, and that's a good thing. It's mutually beneficial for both parties. So, Tuck, you're wrong. Next.
Christian population in the region has declined dramatically since Israel became a state in 1948.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure why.
Well, again, I think it has to do because the whole issue is that Israel has continued to grow and think that they can dominate the Christian areas, the areas of Palestine. So they make it very difficult for anyone else to be able to live there. As simple as that.
Well, first of all, I think it's just important to set the record straight and to say that although Christian communities might be declining in number in the region, as Tucker said, actually Israel is the only place in which Christian communities are growing in our region. So in the general region and all the Muslim states around Israel, Christian communities are emigrating, are leaving because of cultural and political pressures. But within Israel, they're actually growing. So it's just even completely inaccurate what they said.
And I think it is also worth noting, look, there are many distinctions that are made throughout this interview between Israel and what Mother Agapia refers to as Palestine over and over and over again. But when we talk about Israel, we're generally talking about Israel proper, not the disputed regions. We can talk about the decline of Christian population in those regions and the reasons why, and I think it's important to do that. Tucker here is referring to the general region, and then she makes some more statements regarding specific countries in the region.
I want to speak about that. So again, there is a difference between the Palestinian territories and Israel, right? You know that I've done a lot of legal work for Christian minorities within Israel. There are Christians from a Jewish background in Israel. Some refer to them to Messianic Jews as part of the Christian minorities. I know that just over the last decade, the Messianic Jewish community has probably doubled. It's a very small community, but let's say grown from 20,000 to 40,000 people within Israel. Like within Israel, Christian communities are growing. In the Palestinian Authority, they're declining. You and I, Shimon, obviously worked within the framework of the Jerusalem Institute of Justice, which represented religious minorities in the Palestinian Authority. And you remember all the cases, from death penalty for selling land from, a Christian to a Jew, death penalty for conversion from Islam to Christianity. There were cases of Muslim families, even in Bethlehem, which was 80% Christian in 1948 and is less than 8% today. Why? Because of discrimination, persecution, harassment from the Palestinian Authority. Now, it has nothing to do with Israel. I remember cases where Muslim families would come in and take over a home or real estate property of a Christian family. It would go to a Palestinian court, sit under a judge that was appointed by the PLO, Fatah, and they would side with the intruders, and people would just lose their property, arbitrarily, and of course end up moving to South America or somewhere else in the world. And so when we asked thousands of Palestinians, most of them Christian, over the years, where would you prefer to be a citizen, in the state of Israel or, the Palestinian Authority? All of them said the exact same two answers, basically. Obviously, Israel, dummy. And secondly, please don't quote me, because there's so much persecution, harassment. People get arrested just for expressing a political opinion contrary to the political opinion of the Palestinian Authority. So the whole thing is missing from this conversation between Tucker and and Mother, what's her name, Agapia,
not Teresa.
Exactly, is the violent oppression of Christian communities by the Palestinian leadership, and particularly Hamas. And so, instead of bringing that out, she should be ashamed of herself for somehow trying to whitewash Hamas of their responsibility for the well-being of the Christians in these areas. And we're talking, if you remember, we're talking about documented cases of thousands of arbitrary arrests per annum, hundreds of cases of torture and degrading treatment, executions without trial. This is the way the Palestinian Authority treats Christians. And so it's, if the Christians in the Palestinian Authority, if their populations are declining, that's not because of Israel. It's because of their own leadership.
And this also just sort of emphasizes a greater theme of this entire interview. And I want those of you that are following Tucker Carlson, like we are, just to sort of see what he's saying, what he's trying to get across the finish line, and what the direction that he's trying to influence people in. You're going to notice a theme throughout this interview where the problem is not Islam. The problem is not, you're going to hear the problem is not Hamas. She's going to praise Hamas in this interview. The problem with declining Christian populations in the region is Israel. And the problem is always Israel. That's the point they're trying to get across here. It's one of the themes of this. It's never as it's been understood in the Western world. The problem is Israel. And that could not be further from the truth.
Calev, you're a Christian in Israel. How are you treated? How is your family treated?
Yeah. So our family, obviously, our father is Jewish and our mother is Christian. So we're Christians of Jewish descent, right? Whereas in other countries, Christians throughout the Middle East, Christians face persecution by the establishment, by the government. It's quite the opposite here. So we have radical, fringe groups within our society that do harass sometimes, Christian minorities within Israel, but the government comes to protect them. I'll just give probably the worst case that I personally experienced in the last couple of years. I believe this was in June 2024, which during the Shavuot holidays, which is Pentecost, there was a Christian worship concert, music concert. A couple of my daughters were actually going to be singing in it. And some people put posters out on the street that said, this is a missionary event, even though it wasn't a missionary event. There was no conversions going on. It was just Christian music for a Christian crowd. They kind of whipped up the radical anti-missionary fringe groups into a frenzy. Hundreds of I would say, young people in their late teens and 20s kind of stormed the entrance to the concert and were preventing people from going in, and they were pushing and spitting. Our sister was actually, unfortunately, I think 56 at the time. She was pushed into a wall and kicked, and it was very infuriating. I say all that to say that the Israeli police showed up very quickly, and I saw them work for 4 or 5 hours, pushing the mob back, sweating, putting their life in danger so that these Christian minorities could go in and out of the concert without being harassed, and to access their right to worship in freedom. In any other country in the Middle East, definitely in the Palestinian Authority, if posters would go up regarding a missionary event, it's the police and the government that would come and shut it down, probably arrest people, probably torture people, and probably kill people. So it's a completely different situation. We have freedom of religion that is protected by the government. Are there crazies in our society that sometimes, go off the deep end and create a provocation or a demonstration or some kind of harassment? Absolutely, like in any Western society. But we have rule of law, and we have protection of religious rights. So that's what it's like for me. I feel that I can worship in complete freedom. We go to our congregation every week, where we study the Bible together, and we have worship together. And it would be like any probably evangelical church internationally, but in Hebrew, and zero harassment whatsoever. We've been doing it for years. There's no problem. Those are our rights, and those are protected by our government. That's what it's like to be a Christian in Israel.
Nice.
Let's go to a few more statements.
Muslims are not jihadists, the ones that I know. I'm not saying other parts of the world that may be the case, but in Palestine, it's simply not the case, or Syria or Lebanon or Iraq. The Muslims, that for the most part, are they've all grown up together, the Christians and the Muslims, and there's a certain amount of commonality and respect.
This is a very different story from the one that we're told in the American media, that Christians are imperiled by Muslims in the Middle East.
They are not imperiled by Muslims in Palestine. That is an absolute fact.
Okay, so let's pick these statements apart. Okay. Calev, as you said, this is shameful. This is absolutely shameful. And I want you to notice, those of you that are watching, the language that Tucker uses. We've been made to believe in the West that Christians in the Middle East are in peril at the hands of Muslims. And then you have Mother Agapia, doubling down on these statements that she's saying are fact. So let's get into it. A couple things. I'll just point out some numbers. She mentioned some surrounding countries. Number of Christians has declined astronomically over the course of years. They at one point were 1.5 million Christians in Syria. Now they're around 300,000 Christians in Syria. In Iraq, there were 1.5 million Christians. Now they estimate between 120 to 200,000 Christians. We're talking about significant decreases in Christian population in these regions. In Jordan in the early 1900s, 18% of Jordanians were Christian. Today, about 2% of Jordanians are Christian.
Israel's fault, probably.
Right. And the reasons for that is because of persecution at the hands of Muslims. Tucker says, well, we've been made to understand here in the West by the mainstream media. So again, this is psyops. This is all subtle language. Anything you hear in the mainstream media is wrong. You should listen to my platform. My platform is the truth. We've been made to believe over the course of years that Christians are in peril at the hands of Muslims in the Middle East. Shouldn't Americans know that that's not true? And she's saying that Christians in Palestine, are certainly not in peril. That is fact. Well, we can look at the numbers in the Palestinian regions. And Calev, I do want you to talk about some specific stories, because I know this is
definitely.
work that you've dedicated a lot of your life to. But I do want to say, just in Gaza, pre-Hamas, there were about 4,000 Christians in Gaza. Now they estimate there are 700. And the reasons for that is fear of Islamist rule and persecution at the hands of Muslims. It is not because of Israel. It is because of all of the things that you mentioned, Calev. And I'd like you to just double down on that and go a little bit more into detail and give some specific stories of things that you've experienced, people that you've represented, on behalf of human rights and civil rights in Israel.
Definitely. So again, within the framework of my private practice and the Jerusalem Institute of Justice, we've challenged the Israeli government many times to make life freer and better for Israelis, including freedom of religion. We challenged the Palestinian Authority to make life freer and better for Palestinians, obviously believing that all human beings are created in the image of their maker, and we should focus on the solutions that improve the quality of life of both peoples on both sides of the conflict. It's very different. Israel has rule of law and independent court system. Out of the, probably over 2,000 cases we've handled now, we've won 99% of them, which is a testimony to the way the Israeli system works. In the Palestinian Authority, it's very different. There is no independent court system. So in Gaza, the judges are appointed by Hamas, which is a radical terrorist organization. And in the West Bank, they're appointed by Fatah, which is another Islamic faction of the Palestinian Authority. And they always have an anti-Christian bent. And so the only thing we could do in order to realize the rights of Christian communities is to go to the international community, go particularly to funding bodies, governments that are giving, hundreds of millions of dollars of aid into the Palestinian Authority, and ask them to precondition their aid on human rights reforms, and also to get involved in certain cases, to release this journalist or that pastor is being held in prison because of, maybe actually converting a Muslim to Christianity or some terrible crime like that, which again, according to the official Palestinian policy, is worthy of the death penalty. But let's ask the question why, a few years ago...
Let me pause 1 second just to get this straight so everyone can hear this. You're saying that converting someone from Islam to Christianity under the Palestinian Authority... Yes.
The official
according
Palestinian
to law,
Authority
is punishable by death.
By death, by execution, yes. And that's both under Fatah and Hamas. So, for those people who say, Hamas are a radical organization, but Fatah in the West Bank is a little more moderate. That's also like official Fatah policy. And they've said it on record many times, and it's part of their legal system. But, speaking of Gaza, because she said, there is no, persecution of Christians by Muslims in Palestine. Well, certainly she would consider Gaza to be in Palestine. And why were there thousands of Christians in Gaza several years ago, and now they're, maybe as few as 100 or 200? I don't know exactly. Let me ask this question: why is there no longer a Christian bookstore in Gaza? One of the cases I took care of in 2007 was the tragedy of Rami Ayad, who was the owner of a Christian bookstore in Gaza. And after receiving several threats to his life from Hamas, they eventually kidnapped him, murdered him, mutilated his body, and threw it, in front of the bookstore as a very clear warning that, this type of proliferation of Christianity will not be tolerated in Gaza. At that time, I worked together with Jay Sekulow from the American Center of Law and Justice, and we helped his widow escape, because we felt like her life was in danger as well. So his widow and his family escaped from Gaza into Israel, so they would be protected from this type of persecution. So, she's spitting on the grave of martyrs like Rami Ayad, who was killed for his faith and his stand on behalf of Christianity by Hamas, by saying there is no Muslim persecution of Christians in Palestine. It's absolutely ridiculous, and she should be ashamed of herself.
It's shameful. And I just want listeners to think about that. You've got a Christian, owner of a Christian bookstore, who's tortured, mutilated, and then his body is put on display in front of a Christian bookstore in Gaza, at the hands of Hamas. And his wife who you, Calev, helped escaped to where?
To Israel.
Escaped to Israel. Think about that, people. Where does she feel safe? Not in Gaza, but in Israel. And I'm not sure how Mother Agapia interprets the word imperiled, but I think it's safe to say that what Rami went through in his family is beyond the definition of imperiled. And that's why you're seeing the significant decrease in numbers in the population of Christians in the Palestinian territories. And it's also why you're seeing the increase in numbers of Christians, significant increase in Israel proper. In 1948, when Israel became a state, how many Christians were there in Israel?
40,000.
There were 40,000 Christians in Israel, and today there are an estimated 200,000,
something like that,
in Israel.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
So those numbers have increased dramatically, while within the Palestinian territories, as well as the surrounding countries in the Middle East, for those of you that want to understand geopolitics in the region, in all of those areas that are ruled by Muslims, the population of Christians has indeed decreased significantly. It's disappearing. What you're hearing Mother Agapia and Tucker promote here is not truth, and it is not based on facts. Period.
But wait a second. We could mention that, when our president Moshe Katsav was unfortunately, found guilty for sexual harassment and rape and sent to prison, that was an Arab Christian judge that sent a Jewish president to Christian, sitting as the head of a panel in our district court. We can look at Israel's largest bank, Bank Leumi. The current CEO of Israel's largest bank is a Christian Arab, right? Our friend George Deek, he's now the ambassador of Israel to Azerbaijan. He used to be, on our diplomatic delegation to Norway. He's Arab Christian from Jaffa. So you have Arab Christians I can bring another 100 examples like that, completely integrated into every echelon of our business sector, of our political sector, of our legal sector, judicial, with full equal rights like any other citizen in this area.
Democracy hard at work. And one of the things that I also want to point out is there's a lot of nuance in all of these. So everything that we're going to talk about here today involves a ton of nuance, right? So it's not to say that there's no discrimination against Christians in Israel. Is there discrimination against Christians in the United States or any other country on the planet? There are these isolated incidents, and but they don't exemplify Israeli society or the Israeli people or the nation of Israel. So what you're hearing over and over again throughout these interviews where, Tucker's using these small isolated incidents to bash Israel, condemn Israel, criticize Israel, try to destroy the relationship between Israel and the United States. But these are not things that exemplify Israel and Israeli society. And we need to say it. People need to understand that.
There are radical Jewish youth hooligans that spit on priests in the old city. That happens from time to time. And my mother Agapia said that she herself was spit on. That might be true. I don't know. No way of verifying that. And if so, that's terrible. But what she didn't mention is that each one of those cases is I think she even said that they're never found, they're never investigated. It's not true. The police investigates people, the police detains people, the police arrest people. When they have sufficient evidence, they also try and convict people of doing things like that. And it made me think, if a youth in New York City spits on a priest, are they going to be arrested, detained, tried, convicted of anything? Like, Israel is hypersensitive to these type of religious offenses and takes them very seriously. And even though those things do happen in our society, they're immediately rebuked and criticized by 99% of the Israeli public, the Israeli media, the Israeli political and legal system. And so you're right, this does exist here. But looking at this with a magnifying glass, as if these problems don't exist anywhere else in the world, and as if they would be treated somehow, in a better way somewhere else in the world, I think is absolutely.
And this is across the board. That's a modus operandi that is used across the board against Israel. We're going to get into it with license plate colors and all types of different stuff we'll talk about here. And these things are very, very nuanced and exist in every society, every country, every border. Right. So there are sucky people everywhere, but they don't typify and exemplify all of Israel. Let's before we move off the subject of, whether it just sounds so ridiculous to even say whether Christianity in the Middle East and in the Palestinian regions is imperiled by radical Islam. Before we move off of that, let's just listen to Mother Agapia contradict herself when she's asked a very pointed question by Tucker, the one about conversion.
The one where she just can't answer. She's like, it's very...
Because people will be killed.
Right.
Yeah, she will be killed.
Yeah, she's terrified to answer that question.
Go ahead.
Did you make any converts in Palestine? Ever? Did you
mean of
Muslims converting to Christianity?
You have to be careful with it, but I will say that I do know there's Muslims that have converted to Christianity, but it's not something you can do openly. Not that they're going to be killed, but it won't be looked upon well, and it's not easy to do.
Is it legal?
To proselytize? In Palestine?
Yeah.
You can talk to in Orthodoxy. We aren't really a proselytizing faith. It's a faith that's done of what you are and how you live. You know what I mean? It says you don't act missionary work in a lot of.
Okay, honestly, as somebody who's played professional poker, I just want you to watch the tells and watch her start to scramble.
It's not that.
It's not that they're going to kill you, even though it's their law that it's punishable by death, and they literally do kill you. Well, is it legal? The Orthodoxy is it? We're not a proselytizing group.
She literally starts getting nervous, like, oh my God, if somebody sees this, I might not be able to go into Palestine again.
You can almost see the sweat beating up on her upper lip in this section of the interview. It's like literally she just starts squirming in her chair. Absolutely insane, and couldn't be further from the truth. And she cannot answer that question. She does not answer that question because she can't. It literally contradicts the entire point of everything that she's trying to say. How incredibly dangerous it would be to convert from Islam to Christianity, but also for the person that would constitute that conversion, your life is absolutely in danger. 100%.
Yeah, it's also the Achilles heel of the Palestinians are good people and Israel's the big problem. Well, wait a second. What she's actually doing is advocating for an Islamic police state that systematically abuses human rights. If there is no freedom of conscience, there's no freedom of religion. If there's no freedom of religion, there's no freedom of speech. If you can't share your faith and have an honest conversation with somebody, from a different religion, then what kind of freedom is there? And as a Christian, advocating for a regime, as not just a Christian, as a nun, as an official representative of the Orthodox Church, you're advocating for a regime that officially executes people for converting somebody from Islam to Christianity, is unbelievable. And it's very interesting to see her squirm in her seat when she was asked that question.
Which is a nice caveat. Let's go to Mother Agapia's perspective on Hamas.
She has a kafia underneath that. What is that called again?
Habit, maybe.
Yeah, habit. I should know that. My first teacher was a nun.
There's a wonderful person. When you talk about resistance, this all started with Hamas. So for the most part, I would say they're a resistance movement. They're simply people fighting for their people, trying to protect their land.
She's right. Have you how Hamas stands out there and passes out aid to all the people, and they're there protecting all of the camps and all of that.
Didn't they build those 500 kilometers of bunkers underneath Gaza
to protect the people?
To protect the people for the Gazans to shelter themselves in amidst this.
It's interesting that she said that there are people protecting people on behalf of their land. So, like, what does that mean? Like, Israel actually belongs to Hamas, according to Mother, Agapia, and people protecting people means storming across our border and slaughtering innocent families in their kitchens and their bedrooms, beheading young couples, carrying out the worst atrocities, burning families alive, and then firing between 20 to 30,000 rockets at civilian populations in Israel. This is just people protecting people, just
And she opens up with, she opens that statement up. She's kind of meandering a little bit with her words, as she does often. But I think it opens up with, you want to talk about a beautiful person or something like that. Like, you want to talk about a beautiful person. Resistance. It all started with Hamas. What are you talking about? And one thing we can be certain of is Hamas has zero commitment to the well-being of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, in Israel, in the West Bank, anywhere. They are not committed to freedom for their people or protecting their people, period. They are a totalitarian regime that rules the people there, discriminates against, kills them for seeking aid. You cannot be a dissident voice. Everything that she's saying here couldn't be further from the truth. And it is disgusting. It's despicable and it's shameful. And it's shameful that Tucker Carlson would even allow a voice like this to be on his platform. It is disgusting. This is an officially labeled terrorist organization. These are terrorists that are being praised right here.
I would ask Tucker Carlson and Mother Agapia, who purport to be Christian, if they think that Jesus, if he was alive today, would look at Hamas and think that there are people helping people. Like, what in the world are you talking about? And I'd also challenge Tucker Carlson to, invite one of us to speak on his podcast. I love to speak on his podcast about these issues. You take these radical, ridiculous, lying voices and put them up on your platform because you're not able to deal with the truth. Speak to somebody like me that's represented thousands of Palestinians, including Christian minorities, with civil rights cases, throughout the West Bank and Gaza. Let's be a man. Put somebody that actually will tell the truth on your platform instead of this disgusting propaganda.
Look at the extent that he's had to go to find these voices. I mean, just look at this person. This is not a credible person. This is not a credible nun, and it's demonstrated in every facet of everything that she has to say. This is how far he's had to go in order to demonize and bash the state of Israel. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes my blood boil. Okay, let's look at some other absolute falsehoods in her statements, and let's explain some of the nuance. We can talk about moving around in Israel and license plates.
Calev, what color is your license plate?
Yellow.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second.
I went to Washington and spoke to some congresspeople, not to demean Jews or not to even demean the state of Israel, to say, look, we are being affected by this wall. It's affecting our religious life. I can't go to visit my convent easily anymore because of this wall. It's disrupting our school life. And we'd like to see, it's not for security. It's not separating Israel from Palestine. It's separating Palestine from Palestine.
There's a lot to pick apart here. You could pick apart what exactly is Palestine, but we're not going to even go there. Let's talk about what she refers to as a wall. Let's talk about what we refer to as a security fence and the reason for its existence, and Calev some data on that. I know you've done quite a bit of research and created some content on that, which we will share here. Can you just share with us what is the fence all about?
Yeah, so what she refers to as a wall is actually physically 99% of it is a fence. It's not a concrete wall. In and around the checkpoints, they do have these tall walls, and that's what's always photographed when they talk about the wall. She calls it a wall of ethnic separation, but it's not a wall of ethnic separation. It's not a wall of apartheid. It's a security fence, and we have to go back and remember why it was created. When we started building it in 2002, it was at the height of this intifada, where there were over 400 Israelis killed that year through Palestinian terrorism coming out of dangerous areas in the West Bank. So Israel said, in order to protect our citizens from this ongoing wave of terrorism, we're going to create a patrol security fence with specific checkpoints so that terrorists will have a difficult time infiltrating Israel. And if people want to come into Israel, the 150,000 Palestinians that come between the West Bank and Israel every day to work, and they're, innocent citizens, will just check their papers, make sure they can get in and let them through. Or people that need, obviously hospital care and so on and so forth. But it keeps the terrorism out. So that was 2002. We began to build the security fence. 2009, when it was completed, there were 8 deaths of Israeli through Palestinian terrorism, which means the security fence brought down death by terror of Israelis 99.7%. Okay? In simple terms, with the fence we live, without the fence we die. She just said, it's not about security. Excuse me? there are people dying every day. And if that wouldn't have happened, the fence wouldn't be there. So I want to say, I'll ask you a question as a Christian. What do you think is a worse evil? Palestinian citizens having to stand at a checkpoint to have their papers checked in order to go to work in the morning and come back, and the inconveniences that creates, or innocent civilians dying from terror? What's a greater evil? And, obviously in these type of situations, a fence is completely legitimate. I hope that one day the fence will be removed. I hope that one day we will be able to come to some peaceful settlement, and, there will not be this type of terrorism and security threats. And, I don't like the fence. It separates people. It's ugly on the landscape, and I wish it wasn't there. I actually hope and believe that one day it'll be taken down. But as long as there's a real and present danger and threat of, murderous terrorism, it has to be there.
Yeah, and let's talk about it. She mentions moving to Israel in 1996. I can remember in 1996, right? I resided in Jerusalem at the time, on my way to work in the morning, taking one of 2 buses. Bus number 18 was coming the other way. I can remember pulling up to an intersection and being the first group of people, because I was on a bus that was going the opposite direction of a bus that was blown to pieces just seconds before my bus crossed this path. And I got to view firsthand what that looks like. And those images are ingrained in my mind forever. And then there was another bombing just a week later. And I had to get on the bus every single day and go to work after seeing those things. And, the rest of the world cannot begin to fathom or understand the effects of that type of terror, what it does to the psyche, what it does to the way that you look at people. There isn't a way to avoid it once you experience those types of things. And they are things that have never been experienced by people like Tucker Carlson. And it is shameful that somebody like Mother Agapia would be making these types of statements and this types of stance. You would think that she would understand. Obviously, she hasn't witnessed, exactly what many people in Israel, pretty much everyone that lives in Israel, has had to endure and experience at some point throughout their lives. And I also just want to say, Simone, you've driven around Israel with us. We have to go through those checkpoints too. Mm-hmm. And they're not fun. Like, I don't enjoy sitting in traffic and having to go through a checkpoint. None of us like that. And we're going to talk about the license plates here in a minute that she gets into.
Wait, but you have a yellow license plate. Why do we have to stop at a checkpoint?
Yeah, and I get stopped too. My ID gets checked too. And I'm Israeli. I have dual citizenship. So we're going to talk about all that. It's an inconvenience for everybody, but it's there in order to save lives. And just the level of inconsistencies and misinformation that's being proliferated here is just astounding. And really, like, if you were to give her the absolute extreme benefit of the doubt, it seems like maybe she was living a very monastic, lifestyle when she was in Israel. I don't know how long she was there, but she must have been locked up in some convent somewhere, being fed radical Islamic propaganda, because almost nothing that she says has a basis in truth or reality.
She even said the town that she lived in is 98% Muslim. So she was like the 2%. So anyway, let's talk about the license plates.
And then Palestinians have green and white plates, and they cannot use. So over that time that I've been here, as the settlements have grown, you build the infrastructure for it. The electricity, the roads, separate roads that are used only by people that have yellow plates. as a foreigner and part of a foreign church, we were entitled to have either those, or they also have white diplomatic plates, that kind of diplomatic and religious plates that are there. So there's very much an apartheid system. Very much so. It's which gave me the freedom to help my Christian friends in Bethlehem and other places.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a second because just the contradictory nature of everything that she's saying here. Earlier Tucker's saying, well, shouldn't Christians, our tax dollars, we're a Christian country and our tax dollars support everything in Israel. Israel is completely supported by their patron country, the United States. You would think that they would have special privileges. Well, here she demonstrates clearly that she actually does, as somebody from a foreign country and also as a nun, that she not only does she get special treatment, special license plate, special identity, she's able to help people that share her faith in navigating these checkpoints. She literally says it. And then she turns it around somehow to demonstrate that the color of license plates is an apartheid state. But a couple things I want to say, Calev, because I want you to explain how it works with license plates and some of the nuance in Israel. I drive a lot here in the United States, and I see all kinds of different colors of license plates that identify which state people live in, where they're coming from. When I cross a border, if I want to drive up into Canada, when I move from one legal recognized territory into another, I pass through some type of checkpoint and have to give some type of identity. And I would imagine that the people that are, responsible for those checkpoints look at my license plate to see where I'm from, if I'm from a different region, and then they have protocol in place in order to make sure that I'm there for legitimate reasons. And what am I doing there? And do I have the proper paperwork to enter? These are just normal, everyday things that happen in every single country, in every single state, every single region of the planet. And to single out and isolate Israel as an apartheid state because there are different colored license plates and people have to go through checkpoints when they move from one territory, one legally recognized territory, into another, we can put aside all of the the terror and all the different things and the reasons that Israel has to be hyper vigilant on this, and just look at the practicality. To use that to somehow demonize Israel as an apartheid state is just absolutely ridiculous.
Right. So let me just go into detail here so I can show you the proof that Israel is an apartheid state. Okay. If you're an Israeli citizen that receives your license plate from the Israeli Ministry of Transportation, you have a yellow license plate. If you are from the Israeli police, you have a red license plate. If you're from the Israeli army, you have a black license plate with white letters. If you're a diplomatic corps or somebody from an international church like this, you will have a white license plate with black numbers. And if you receive your license plate from the Palestinian Authorities Ministry of Transportation, it will be white with green letters. So that is the proof that we are dealing with an apartheid state.
Clearly. Clearly the fact that the Palestinian Authority gets to issue license plates, and that they.
And by the way, I see them driving in my area within Israel proper all the time. So it's not like, if you have a green and white license plate, you can't get into Israel. Again, many of them work in Israel. There's, over 100,000.
And if you have a yellow license plate, can you literally drive anywhere in Israel?
No, you have to receive special permission from the government to go into the Palestinian territories because of the security concerns there.
Well, what would happen if you
is
drove
Israel
your car?
apartheid against? So Israel's also apartheid against their own, against yellow license plate holders, right? Because they have to go through a special process to enter into Palestinian regions, right? So Israel is apartheid also against Jewish Israelis that have a yellow license plate, right? I'm trying to understand how apartheid works. It's just, it's so confusing.
So the truth is, if everything is apartheid, then nothing is apartheid. And right. So it's just,
the whole world is apartheid.
What would happen if you drove your car with your yellow plate into Bethlehem or Jericho or
Ramallah?
What would happen?
So according to the law, I have to get a an advance permission from the Israeli government to go into those areas, and they would not let me in if they have intelligence that points to a specific security threat at that time in a certain area, because then they would be responsible for my safety in that situation. If I just ignore that law and go into the areas, when I'm on my way back coming through the checkpoint, if they see that I'm an Israeli citizen and I didn't have that permission, they wouldn't arrest me, but it would probably be fined. But it is like a minor, offense, of our criminal code.
Haven't there been Israelis that have yellow license plates that have accidentally meandered into some of these Palestinian regions?
Yes, absolutely. Some of them to reach a very, very tragic fate, which is the reason that they put those regulations in place. Because of the lynchings. The famous lynching in Ramallah, where people out with yellow plates accidentally drove into Ramallah, which is the headquarters of the Palestinian Authority, and they were literally lynched by mobs who
in the worst kind of way,
mutilated their bodies, and then proudly stood, waving their bloody hands, to the cameras, proud of what they did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I guess that just every country in the world is apartheid because of different colored license plates that happen there. And because
definitely Canada, the United States, there's no question. Yeah.
Because of borders and checkpoints that you have to go through when you move from one territory to the other. It's so discriminatory that people should have to do that anywhere on the planet. But, what is nice is that because of her status as a Christian from another country, she received special treatment and was able to actually use that special treatment to help other Christians that were wanting to move, freely around the country and sort of maybe move through some of these checkpoints sooner. So that's really good. I'm really happy to hear that Israel's at least made some of those accommodations for people like Mother Agapia. Okay, on to the next.
Agapia or Agapia? I feel like pronunciation changed.
It used to be Maria. It was. Look it up.
I think Agapia means love in Greek. And, she's obviously a Greek Orthodox nun. And so with all the love that she's been exuding towards Israel in this interview, it's
fitting.
Brotherly love.
They would call her, Agapia.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pivot. Let's pivot quickly because to one of the big points that Tucker's constantly trying to make, which is that Israel is not a friend to America.
We're just going to talk about the hypocritical nature of Tucker Carlson.
But like at the final decade of the Cold War, there were a lot of Jews in the Soviet Union who were being persecuted.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, everyone in the Soviet Union was being persecuted, including the Jews.
Right.
And
they came to Israel?
Yeah, they came to Israel. They came to the United States, and there were Jewish groups in the U.S. and in Israel that I supported then and I support now who said, we got to get our people out of there and help them. They were called refuseniks.
Right. Yep.
And my dad worked in this, actually. And I thought that was great.
Sure.
You don't see that with any Christian group with Christians in the Middle East. There's no Christian group in the United States that I'm aware of. It's like, hey, those are our people. Maybe we should help them.
No, they are. And I think certainly the Catholic Church in America has to do a lot more as an institution. I mean, we should have a Christian APAC group. Of course. Yeah.
So there shouldn't be an APAC for the Jews, but there should 100% be an APAC for Christians. I thought you just fundamentally had a problem with any group like APAC. By the way, which there are many. There are many groups exactly like APAC here in the United States that are not registered with FARA. People, look it up. There are many of them. All of that being said, you would literally have to go out in your backyard, Tucker, and dig a hole and bury it in the ground to not know that there are many, many groups that exist to help and fight for Christianity in the Middle East and Christian rights and Christians in the Middle East. I wouldn't even know where to start and stop with the list of organizations that are devoted and committed to that. We are friends with many of those people. What you are proliferating is just absolute nonsense. There's no truth in it whatsoever. Not to mention your just ridiculous inconsistencies. Of course there should be an APAC for Christians when you've just been bashing everything about APAC for Jews for months. I don't know why anyone would think I'm anti-Semitic. I supported Russians, escaping death in Russia. I supported Jews escaping death in Russia. Why would anyone think that? The double standards are absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically, obviously, it would be ACPAC, not APAC, because it would be the American Christian Political Action Committee. But APAC is evil. ACPAC would be, wonderful.
100%. It should 100% should exist. I don't support any war. I don't think we should ever go to war. But I think, if Iran was trying to assassinate our president, we should 100% nuke Iran. 100%. But I don't believe in war. I don't believe in nuclear war. Honestly, I don't know how anybody could take this guy seriously anymore.
I know.
Literally, like, he just talks out of both sides of his mouth. You could tell his body language. He's starting to sweat. I think, they're like looking, like their hair is all disheveled when it starts out. You can't see it, but eventually, like, her hair ends up sort of around. Like, these are people that are, how can we make Israel look bad? How can we make Israel look bad?
Which I think, going back to where we started, I'm not sure that this video causes a lot of harm to Israel, because it's just so blatantly, obviously ridiculous.
For people that can see and want to see the truth, this is such a contradiction of anything true. Those of you that, like I did, that Gen Xers and baby boomers, we used to watch a show called The Flying Nun. Well, here you've witnessed the Lying Nun. She makes a statement, and Tucker sort of doubles down on it, about how Israelis view Americans, because they have this agenda to destroy the relationship between the United States and Israel. And she says that Israelis view Americans very negatively. She's never known Israelis to, like Americans. And I just want to say, because as an Israeli and an American, Israelis love Americans. And any American that has gone to visit Israel will know that. You are warmly welcomed and greeted. There's an enormous amount of gratitude. Israel is extremely grateful for the help, support, and friendship that they share with America and the shared value system. If you want to know why Israel dominates 90% of the news feeds, especially on shows like Tucker Carlson's, it's because it is the front lines for the battle for Western civilization as we know it, Judeo-Christian values, and the battle just between good and evil that's taking place on the planet today, between truth and lies, misinformation. Israel is the front lines, and we're here to talk about it and dig deep. Keep tracking with us. Thank you, and enjoy The Lying Nun.
Bye.
That was a fantastic ending, Shimon, and I'm sorry for ruining it. But if you have maybe family members, friends that buy into this stuff, maybe they follow Tucker Carlson, maybe they're affected by these type of messages, please share this. Please share this video with them. Share this podcast with them. Obviously, like, subscribe, join us in being a voice for freedom. But you can do that by getting this message out to people who need to hear it. Thank you.